Do you see what Whoopi Goldberg said?
What'd she say?
Whoopi Goldberg said,
This Turning Point conference, these were in the front of out there in front of the conference with anti-Semitic slurs.
Every single person that attended that Turning Point, every Republican speak up against these, because against the flags that were waved.
You let them in.
President, open your
You let them in and you knew what they were.
Right.
So you are complicit.
We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it.
Picture this: a live television broadcast, daytime TV, millions watching at home. On the stage sits Whoopi Goldberg, leaning forward in her chair, and then she drops a line that sends shockwaves across the country. She claims that a Turning Point USA student event, packed with high school and college kids, was somehow connected to anti-Semitic protesters waving hateful signs outside the venue. She doesn't hold back. She suggests that the students, the organizers, even the entire event, let those extremists in and were complicit. Think about that for a second. Thousands of young people, many attending their very first political conference, suddenly painted with the same brush as neo-Nazis. Families who sent their kids to learn and network now have to explain why their children's names are being dragged into a national scandal. And this wasn't whispered gossip. It was broadcast on one of the biggest daytime shows in America. It wasn't just a slip-up. It came across as an accusation with real weight, and it instantly made headlines. Parents were furious, students were humiliated, and the message was clear. If you step into the wrong political space, you could be branded for life. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now, let's continue. What followed next was nothing short of explosive, because one man decided this smear wouldn't just fade into the noise of the news cycle. That man was Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, and he wasn't about to let this slide. Imagine being responsible for over 5,000 students who traveled from all over the country, only to have their reputations stained on national television.
This is the most important part. This was right after she was saying, we are run by ABC News. You should trust us, not Joe Rogan, who believes in dragons. So she by saying we should trust them because they're double checked by ABC News, and then making the stupidest statement.
So, Charlie, do you accept the Views apology?
Regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis.
Kirk knew the damage wasn't just emotional, it was permanent. Those kids would now carry the shadow of Goldberg's words, and for many, it could follow them for the rest of their lives. Instead of issuing a fiery press release or trading insults on social media, Kirk took a route that shook Hollywood and the media world to its core. He brought in lawyers, not just any lawyers, top-tier, battle-tested attorneys, the kind you call when you're not looking for a simple apology, but for a full-scale war. And then came the nuclear strike, a lawsuit worth $100 million. Think about that. $100 million. This wasn't some symbolic protest. This was a demand for accountability that could sink careers, shake boardrooms, and make executives lose sleep at night. Kirk wasn't just defending his students, he was sending a message to anyone who thought they could smear without consequence. He turned what could have been brushed off as TV drama into a legal battleground with stakes that even the View's producers couldn't ignore. This lawsuit wasn't only about the courtroom, it became a cultural weapon, a warning shot to the entire media landscape. Defame the wrong people and you'll pay the price. And just as the papers were being filed, another voice jumped into the fire, one that would make the scandal explode even bigger. That voice belonged to Joe Rogan. Now, this is where things really caught fire. While The View tried to sit comfortably in their studio and brush off the storm, Rogan turned their slip-up into a full-on roast that millions tuned in to hear. He didn't tiptoe, he didn't sugarcoat, he went straight for the jugular. On his podcast, he mocked the very idea that The View should be trusted simply because it was backed by ABC News. Then, with his usual smirk, he tore apart Whoopi's comments, pointing out how absurd it was to accuse thousands of kids of being connected to hate groups. Rogan framed the whole thing as an example of why mainstream shows like The View are losing trust. He compared them to a circus, a bunch of hosts tossing around accusations for claps and headlines while never being held to the same standards as everyone else.
It is the show that people love to hate.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested hen house.
And at the same time, it seemed like the most interesting part was their audience seemed to be on my side.
Yes.
And that's their audience.
Yes. Well, their audience is not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows.
And he made it funny too, joking that watching them was like watching a lion tamer who's actually terrified of the lion. The audience laughed, but beneath the humor was something sharper. A reality check. When Rogan speaks, it doesn't just reach a niche crowd. His words hit gyms, commutes, kitchens, and earbuds across America. That reach is something The View could never dream of, and his brutal commentary turned their controversy into a cultural talking point. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Whoopi's remarks anymore. It was about trust, hypocrisy, and how far the media could push a narrative before someone finally pushed back harder. And that's exactly what Rogan delivered raw, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. For years, The View had followed the same routine: throw out bold accusations, stir outrage, and then move on without ever facing consequences. But this time, the playbook backfired. The combination of Charlie Kirk's $100 million lawsuit and Joe Rogan's merciless takedown flipped the script completely.
Culture shift between right and left authoritarianism, and now people don't recognize that if you just stopped looking at it in terms of red and blue, look at the actions: suppression of free speech, pharmacological interventions that are mandatory, whatever it is. That used to all be associated with the authoritative right, the authoritarian right, and now those things are being embraced by the left. And I just think it's just an ideology thing, and I think we get confused and we think we're on the right side, and if it's our side that's saying this, for sure that's the right thing to do, and no one's critically thinking about this.
Joe Rogan is the gateway drug for young men that thought they were Democrats to become MAGA. Joe Rogan is the bridge, and on that bridge they'll see RFK, they'll see.
Suddenly, the show that prided itself on being untouchable was stuck on the defensive. What made it sting even more was the way Rogan exposed the gap between The View's image and its reality. On screen, they sold themselves as voices of reason, truth, and accountability. Off screen, their critics saw a panel of elites tossing around judgments while being shielded by the network's power. When Rogan dragged them in front of his massive audience, that illusion started to crumble. Instead of controlling the conversation like they usually did, The View was now the conversation. Clips of Rogan mocking their hypocrisy bounced across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Memes spread faster than their own ratings clips. And while the co-hosts were used to brushing off critics, they couldn't laugh away a lawsuit worth more than most of their contracts combined. This wasn't just another TV spat anymore, it was the beginning of something much bigger. For the first time, The View was facing a challenge it couldn't shout over, spin into a feel-good moment, or wrap up neatly before the next commercial break.
The real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point. Most of those people can't leave the house. I think the problem with that show has this very specific ideological bubble in which they operate in. And they always bring on a token conservative woman and they yell over her and silence her.
So between ambushing Zelensky and this, why would world leaders continue to come to the White House?
Well, their audience is not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows. If you've ever seen audiences before for TV shows, a lot of them are paid because they have to guarantee that there's going to be people there. So there's services that you hire.
This is the problem with getting all your information from Laura Loomer and Elon Musk. This is what they're going to deal you.
It's a very strange show.
The lawsuit was real, the backlash was loud, and the pressure was only growing. And the more they tried to ignore it, the worse it looked. Because the next twist wasn't just about words, it was about survival. That survival hinged on the lawsuit itself. A $100 million claim isn't just a scary number tossed into headlines, it's a weapon. If it moves forward, it drags every detail into the light. Emails, private chats, off-air conversations, even the research or lack of it that went into Whoopi's comments. Discovery alone could turn into a nightmare for ABC executives, because once those records hit the courtroom, they don't just stay in the courtroom. They leak, they spread, and they become ammunition for critics. And here's the thing, this isn't a Twitter feud. It's not a hashtag war. This is legal combat where smug grins and scripted apologies don't work. Once lawyers are involved, every word on live TV can become evidence. That's why Kirk's move shook so many people. It wasn't just about him or his students.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding.
Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth.
I get it. I also hate Joy Behar. So I don't love you, but I also hate that squawking bird. So I hate the whole thing. And frankly, that show, you want to talk about a show that set women back.
It was about setting a precedent that media elites can't smear whoever they want without consequences. For The View, this meant their old tricks were useless. Gasps, dramatic monologues, moralizing speeches, none of it could counter a lawsuit of this scale. You can cut to commercial all you want, but you can't cut away from a court summons. The very act of dragging them into this kind of fight shifted the balance of power. And that's exactly where Rogan came in to make it worse for them. He didn't just laugh at the lawsuit, he highlighted how weak and cornered they looked when their usual weapons were stripped away. Instead of calling the shots, The View was now scrambling, and Rogan made sure the world noticed. And what made it even more brutal was Rogan's reaction to their silence. The View, a show built on constant chatter and fiery debates, suddenly went quiet when it came to the lawsuit. No clever clapback, no segment defending themselves, just awkward detours into fluff topics, as if pretending nothing had happened would make it all go away. But Rogan? He laughed. He outright mocked them for ducking the fight. For his audience, it was priceless. Watching him dismantle their credibility was like watching a heavyweight boxer land punches on a carnival act. There was no contest. While The View's co-hosts clutched their pearls, Rogan described them as out of touch, a clique of elites playing moral authority while hiding from accountability. And that hit hard with viewers who were already fed up with double standards in the media. What made the moment even more devastating for The View was how fast Rogan's words spread. Clips of him calling them out ricocheted across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, racking up millions of views. People weren't just watching, they were laughing, sharing, and piling on. The View's silence was louder than anything they'd ever said, and Rogan made sure everyone noticed. It wasn't just a roast, it was a cultural reset. For years, The View had managed to spin outrage into ratings. But this time, the outrage wasn't working in their favor. And with every clip, every meme, and every Rogan soundbite, their carefully built image kept crumbling.
I get it. I also hate Joy Behar. So I don't love you, but I also hate that squawking bird. So I hate the whole thing. And frankly, that show, you want to talk about a show that set women back, is The View. You want to talk about that show. If the CIA is engineering, Antifa in the Capitol riot, some crazy misogynist engineered The View, because there's nothing worse than The View. In terms of there are so many brilliant women out there. None of them are on The View. None of them have gone near the set of...
And the truth was, this was only the beginning of their problems. Because underneath all the noise, the real issue was bigger than one lawsuit or one roast. It was about how mainstream shows like The View had turned into something more than talk shows. They became machines for outrage. Instead of real debates, it was the same formula every time. Toss out an accusation, spin it into a moral lecture, and drown out anyone who disagreed. But now, that formula was breaking down. Rogan exposed how the show wasn't about diverse voices at all. It was about conformity. Agree with the script and you're applauded, step out of line and you're mocked or silenced. Even their so-called conservative guest hosts were treated like props, dragged in just to be shouted over. What used to look like strong opinions now looked like staged theater. And when mistakes were made, no accountability, just silence. Barbara Walters, the woman who built the show, was long gone, and so was any sense of responsibility. Without that, The View looked less like a talk show and more like a clique of elites cosplaying as the moral conscience of America. That's why Rogan's words didn't just sting, they detonated. He dragged the whole circus into the spotlight and showed viewers what was really going on. And at the same time, Kirk's lawsuit gave that criticism teeth. It wasn't just media gossip anymore, it was a fight with real consequences, real lawyers, and a price tag so massive it couldn't be ignored. And for the first time, The View wasn't laughing at someone else's scandal. They were in the middle of one, and this time the nation was laughing at them. The View's worst nightmare was that this wasn't just staying in the gossip cycle, it was turning into a legal and cultural disaster with no way out. A $100 million lawsuit meant depositions, cross-examinations, and the possibility of every embarrassing email or off-air conversation being dragged into the public eye.
Did you watch the episode when Tulsi Gabbard got on to defend herself and Joy Behar starts panicking and going over her notes while Tulsi is refuting everything that she said?
Yeah, I mean, Joy Behar, again, these people have dementia. These are people who, should not be allowed out of the house. They have a national platform. I mean, it is crazy. They have no idea. These people have never read, a book.
And there's versions of it.
Imagine hosts who spent years tossing insults, now sitting under oath, being grilled about what they knew and why they said it. That alone was enough to send shivers through ABC's boardrooms. But the damage wasn't only legal, it was cultural. The lawsuit and Rogan's commentary together painted The View as fragile, hypocritical, and out of touch. Instead of looking like the nation's moral compass, they looked like bullies caught off guard. The internet made it even worse. Memes mocked their pearl clutching. Clips of Rogan's laughs went viral, and for once, the show's carefully crafted image wasn't in their control. The irony was sharp. The very platform that thrived on calling others out was now facing the same spotlight they had shined on so many people before. And the more they stayed quiet, the louder that spotlight became. The public wasn't just questioning their comments about Turning Point USA, they were questioning the entire foundation of the show. And that question was spreading fast. If The View can't back up what they say, then why should anyone trust them at all? And that's where things took a darker turn, because what we were seeing wasn't just about The View anymore, it was about the entire media system. For decades, daytime TV and corporate news strutted around like they were untouchable. Say whatever you want, smear whoever you want, and walk away without consequence. But suddenly, that shield was cracking. Joe Rogan pointed out something uncomfortable. The tactics that used to define the authoritarian right things, like censorship, silencing, and forcing conformity, were now being embraced by the left. And when a show like The View uses its platform to shame and label people, it stops being entertainment and starts looking like propaganda dressed up with coffee mugs. At the same time, Kirk's lawsuit forced everyone to realize this wasn't a game. A claim that massive can destroy reputations before a judge even bangs the gavel. Discovery would expose backroom whispers, internal contradictions, maybe even proof that the accusations weren't fact-checked at all. And that's the nightmare for ABC, because once those skeletons come out, they can't be shoved back into the closet. The message was simple but devastating. The days of tossing wild claims on live TV and walking away scotangent-free were over. Say something false, defamatory, or reckless, and now you'll be met not just with angry tweets, but with lawyers, lawsuits, and people like Rogan making sure the whole world watches every step of your downfall. And for The View, that realization hit harder than anything they'd ever faced before. The storm didn't stop there. Rogan's massive audience turned what was once a daytime TV controversy into a cultural wildfire. His platform dwarfs The View's ratings, reaching people during workouts, commutes, and even dinner prep. That meant his takedown wasn't just a passing headline, it became part of everyday conversation. People weren't just laughing at The View, they were quoting Rogan, sharing clips, and turning the scandal into digital graffiti plastered across the internet. Meanwhile, the lawsuit itself loomed like a giant shadow. Even if the full $100 million never materialized, the optics were devastating. Picture the scenario. High-priced hosts dragged into depositions, their words dissected line by line, their motives questioned under harsh courtroom lights. Emails, Slack threads, and internal notes could suddenly become public. What had always been hidden behind polished TV smiles might soon be evidence, and that was terrifying for ABC. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Just as Rogan was shredding their reputation in plain language, another co-host stirred the pot. Sunny Hostin dismissed uneducated white women who voted for Trump, sparking backlash for painting millions of Americans as ignorant. Comments like that only reinforced Rogan's point that The View had turned into an elitist echo chamber, where everyday people were insulted and mocked instead of being understood. The audience wasn't buying it anymore, and with the lawsuit hanging overhead, every insult and every slip of the tongue carried even more weight. The empire The View built on outrage and applause lines was beginning to crack in real time. And that crack was exactly what critics had been waiting for. Rogan didn't just say The View was wrong, he made it clear he had zero respect for them. He laughed at their pearl-clutching, mocked their elitism, and ripped apart the idea that they represented women or spoke for everyday people. To him, they weren't empowering anyone, they were setting women back, hiding behind virtue signaling while spewing insults at those who didn't fit their bubble. The internet took that mockery and ran with it. Old clips of the co-hosts talking down to guests resurfaced, Joy Behar panicking when Tulsi Gabbard refuted her live on air. Shady remarks about voters being too dumb without college degrees. Every slip was being dug up, clipped, and shared like evidence in a trial of public opinion. ABC tried to push damage control, but it was like tossing buckets of water at a 5-alarm fire. The problem wasn't just the scandal, it was the tone. Viewers could see the arrogance, the dismissiveness, and the way the hosts dodged accountability when it came to their own mistakes. And that's the kind of hypocrisy Rogan thrives on exposing. What stung the most was his tone. He didn't just disagree, he mocked them. He treated them like they weren't even serious enough to debate. And when millions of people start laughing at you instead of with you, your credibility takes a blow no PR team can fix. That was the dagger. The View wasn't just losing the argument, they were losing the audience. And losing the audience was the one thing they never thought would happen. For years, The View operated like a protected empire, shouting down guests, tossing accusations, and then playing the victim when anyone fired back. But now, the rules had changed. Kirk's lawsuit forced accountability, and Rogan's takedown exposed how fragile their grip on influence really was. The show had always thrived on being the loudest voice in the room, but suddenly there were bigger voices. Rogan's podcast alone steamrolled their ratings. Independent media outlets amplified the scandal. Social media platforms turned the backlash into memes and sound bites that spread faster than The View could ever respond. What once felt like a fortress now looked like a house of cards. And instead of adapting, the hosts doubled down on sanctimony. They sneered at critics, dismissed complaints as ignorance, and carried on as if nothing had changed. But every time they chuckled off criticism, they only made themselves look more out of touch. Every time they branded Kirk dangerous for fighting back, they revealed just how terrified they were of someone finally holding them accountable. The damage was already done. Their silence wasn't strength, it was weakness. And while they sat grinning through daytime fluff, the internet was alive with questions. If The View is so confident in its truth, why won't they defend it? Why hide behind lawyers and PR spin? It was too late to fix the image. The credibility they once wielded was gone, and no amount of applause lines could bring it back. And that's how the story came full circle. The View had built its empire during a time when there was no real counterweight, when their voices echoed as if they were narrating the conscience of the nation. But that era is over. Now, independent voices like Rogan's are louder, sharper, and far more persuasive. And instead of evolving, the co-host clung to the old script-smug lectures, staged outrage, and dismissive sneers at anyone outside their bubble. That's why the backlash hit so hard. Kirk's lawsuit wasn't just legal paperwork, it was a rallying symbol. It told viewers that finally, someone was willing to push back with real consequences. And Rogan's roasting poured gasoline on it, turning the scandal into cultural wildfire. Together, they exposed The View not as untouchable truth-tellers, but as performers trapped in their own hypocrisy. By now, the damage was irreversible. Their empire of selective outrage had collapsed into silence. The same hosts who leapt on every viral controversy suddenly had nothing to say when the heat was on them. And that silence spoke louder than any rant they'd ever delivered. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.